Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattooed Teacher podcast. On this episode, I have the amazing Danni Foster Brown. Now, Danni is an educator without a classroom. Well, not a classroom that we generally know, but Danni has taught over 20 years in the independent sector in the junior middle schools and now in the virtual school environment. She's Google certified. She's a Google educator. She's been a Gold Coast leader in technology. She's also got a master's in education as well. So she's done a lot in a short space of time. Danni, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You've got technology, you've got education, you've got your own children in schooling. All that to say, you are embedded in education, but why? Why? With those brief skills that I just ticked off at the beginning, why education? You could be living the high life really in the IT world.
I think way back when I started education, it was just because I loved kids. And I don't think that's changed much, to be honest. With all of the changes that we've seen over the past, I don't even want to think how many, but 25-ish years. I think, the main reason we do what we do and get out of bed every morning is because love kids and want to see them do the very best that they can. I guess it's our job to kind of see what does that look like in the current landscape and how are we best providing for them and how do we cater for them. So yeah, that's my big why.
Sounds like most teachers. There's some of us like myself who are sort of accidental teachers. We've come from another industry and we've gone, let's have a go, and then we just fall in love with the vocation, and then we see what we do every day. But that love for the young people who are coming through, the next generation of leaders in who knows what field they're actually going to end up in now, because you mentioned the landscape, but it's forever shifting. It's changing ever so rapidly. Has that been that constant change, especially within the technology world and the technology areas? I mean, I used my first computer, I'm not going to say what year, but it was a monochrome screen and it was DOS prompting, and that was cutting edge. And now it's, we're verging on, the supercomputers, and, there's all this stuff going on. How have you managed to, I guess, not so much keep up, but stay relevant with technology and education at the same time?
I remember when I was back at uni and they were really trying to encourage us to take classes in edtech. And at the time I thought, no, that does not interest me at all, which is really interesting, seeing as I'm now leading a virtual school. At the time it wasn't that I didn't think it was going to be impactful or relevant. It was just that it wasn't a passion for me. And I think as I got into teaching, and probably when I was about 10 years into it, we were trying to have a look at how we could potentially look at iPads in the classroom and what that looked like. And so for me, it was when I started to see the benefits of what EdTech could bring into a regular classroom. And all of a sudden, it was around things like connections. We were having kids be able to liaise with real authors or get feedback from people in industry, and not just kind of how everyone writes the letter to the principal to see if we can enact some change in the school, and it's all a bit of a fake thing that never really happens in a lot of schools. And so all of a sudden we were having real people with real connections, and so it allowed me to have a look at what are the types of things that we can do with technology that you couldn't do in a regular classroom. And I was just reflecting the other day on AI, and obviously that's a conversation that everyone's having at the moment. And it kind of struck me that we've been having the same conversation for the last 10, 15 years. It's not about, AI is obviously very different to anything that we've had before, but the conversation is the same. It's how are we using it? Why are we using it? What are the benefits we can get out of it? And if it's not a benefit, then don't use it. So I think although the types of technologies have changed, I don't know that the conversation is really that much different from what we were having 15 years ago, to be honest.
Yeah, you make a very interesting point, because, again, for those who have been around long enough in education, technology, like especially computer-based technology, is relatively new, all things considered. And yeah, you make a good point of it's the same conversation about a new tool. It was calculators and the internet, Google, and now, generative AI. And it is just like, is this the end of education as we know it? What impact is this going to have on us? Impact is this going to have on the students? And how, it's, do you think that through all these conversations now, especially with AI, the conversation has actually gone a little bit deeper in, okay, we've really got to think about the impacts because we've seen the impacts from all of these other things that we thought were just a flash in the pan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because we're now having a look at things like social media law and the impact that social media has had on young people around their emotional and mental well-being, I think all educational leaders should be really not worried, not concerned, but definitely invested in finding out if the way that we're using things is for the benefit of young people, whether that's from an educational or a well-being point of view. And I read a book over the Christmas holidays, which really made me kind of rethink everything that we're currently doing and have done. But at the end of the book, it was kind of suggesting that, oh, well, the only way to get around this is to take all technology out of schools. And it really made me think, and I talked with other teacher friends and educators that I know, and to have a look at how that fits in a classroom in the 2020s. And I don't think that's the answer. I do think we need to go back to learning, and we should always go back to learning and say, is this something that will positively impact learning? And if it's not, then let's move on. But learning itself is looking really different in the 2020s than it did 20 years ago. It's an exciting time, I think, to be an educator and an educational leader, to go, what is the world that we're preparing young people for? And we've been saying for a while now, we won't know what that looks like when our preps are graduating in 12, 13 years. The world is going to be a really different place. So how do you prepare kids for a world that we're not sure of? You have a look at the change that's happened over in the last 3 years. That's about 3 years since ChatGPT first came on the scene for kind of the average person. And it's just incredible. I can't predict what it will look like in 2 years' time, let alone 13 years' time. It is an exciting time to be in education, I think. And all that we can do is kind of say, how do we look at neuroscience? How do we look at learning? How do we take the expertise that teachers have, the people who actually work with these kids and know them and know their syllabi and how young people work and operate, and how do we empower them to kind of take the tools that they've got to be able to really impact these young people and get them excited about learning? And I think technology does definitely have a place in that conversation. I don't think we can just kind of stick our heads in the sand and hope that it goes away. We just really need to look at how it can be used impactfully.
Yeah, so it's not just technologies for technology's sake. Just because it's there, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And the pen and paper is not a bad option for the right application. For some, it's terrible. Like, you shouldn't be using it. You should be using other things. But what I like, and what I love, is that you're saying it's an exciting time to be an educator, which is such a refreshing gust of wind, because there's so many educators who are just, oh, this is so hard, this is terrible. And is that a framing perspective that you've actually had to go, no, hold on, I've got to look at what's happening, and I could go, that's it, education's done for? Or have you gone, look how exciting this is, look what we can do with our students?
Yeah, look, maybe it's a bit of a personality thing where I try and be an optimist as much as I can. But I think at the end of the day, I love learning. Like a lot of teachers, I love learning. And I was just saying to, someone else on my team the other day, I feel like I'm just in this really sweet spot at the moment where there is so much going on that I feel every day I'm learning. And that is exciting as a teacher. And I think it can be tiring. I know that lots of people get burnt out by rapid change and that kind of thing, but it's just, when you continue to see how education can change and help children in a way that it's never helped before, I think that's what excites me. And so, you look at how iPads changed the classroom 10 years ago and now how AI is changing. And I just think, what are the things that do excite me? And it's those things that teachers have always found really stressful. So things like being able to have personalized plans for each student. You can't do that in a class of 30 kids in a traditional classroom. How do you take texts really easily and be able to manipulate that for 17 different reading levels in a regular classroom? That's something that would have taken hours and hours and hours to be able to do that before. And the thing that teachers say time and time again is that time is the issue. They don't have time to be the type of teacher that they really want to be, this ideal version of a teacher who can help every child and see their learning progress every year. And so I think that AI particularly, and technology more broadly, gives us that opportunity to start saying, it can free up time to do the things that teachers really love to do, and B, it just gives them the tools to do that really quickly.
So it's one of those things where you're saying, yeah, it's bringing that time back. And what you've said is it's not time to go, well, I'm going to put my feet up now. It's time to go, what can I invest back into my classroom? What can I invest so that my students have the best chance of success for them, whatever that may look like? And how can I be the best educator for each of my students? From what I'm getting and what I'm understanding, I think, is that all this technology that we use every day is actually enabling us, or will enable some anyway, at least those who look at it in the right way, to actually become more human and make more connection, a better relationship with the student who seems to be disengaged, be able to manipulate, like you said, manipulate the text so that that child who maybe has a lower reading level is able to still understand. Well, they do understand the context of the writing, they just can't understand how to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it still gives them that ability to be part of the conversation in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we just need to look for those opportunities of how can we use technology for the things that humans can't do, and also for those mundane things that do free up that time to be able to do the things that we love and the things that are really important.
Yeah, because there's so much. Some people will disagree with me. There's so much busy work that teachers are now doing. A lot of that has significance, especially in certain areas where programs, NCCD documentation, IEPs, all that needs to be done. And so it's giving us that ability to understand it. And rather than just a tick the box exercise, we're able to actually spend the time to create these documents that are needed. But then from that, we can understand the child, and therefore we can have a better relationship with the child within the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. We were having a really interesting conversation the other day about individual support plans and how we might be able to utilize AI to, summarize some of the adjustments across a class or a cohort or multiple year levels for specialist teachers. And there was really rich discussion around, should we be going back to those original documents to make sure that each teacher has been able to read those documents really carefully. And then there was the kind of the flip side to say, but the reality is when a specialist teacher might be teaching across multiple year levels, have 100 odd students on individual support plans, how can someone possibly be across all of those adjustments? And so look, there's no right or wrong answer at this stage, but it's prompting such interesting discussion about how can we utilize tools to do the job of teaching better. And I think, as teachers, we want to be teachers that are learning and continually improving our craft and being able to serve the students. So yeah, that's I think why it's so exciting, because it's just prompting really rich discussion around how we can be better.
Yeah. Absolutely. Speaking of those rich discussions within in a classroom, especially with colleagues, you've had experience in the IB program, in the PYP and the MYP, I believe. Has that helped? Because I mean, I've taught with in the diploma program, and I know the discussions that happen just within the classroom because of the way the program is written. Do you think that's also helps drive some of your thinking behind what you do now?
Yeah, look, that was the first school that I worked at had the IB program, and it was a really good foundation for looking at interdisciplinary units and how we make those units real world. And I think that's carried through to certainly the school where I'm at now, where we try to make learning as real life as possible. And, it's that age old question of, what did you do at school today? Nothing. Why are we learning this? And you want learning to be exciting for kids. You want it to be relevant. You want them to, see the connections between things that they're learning. And so I think the IB gave a really good foundation of that. We've done a lot of work since then around project-based learning, or what we call design-centered learning, and being able to have kids, not only identify the connections, but actually see that the result of the kinds of investigations that they're carrying out has an impact either on them personally, or their family, or their community, or the world around them. So yeah, that's been a good kind of, I don't know, starting ground, I suppose, for those kinds of units that we now do.
Yeah, you mentioned transdisciplinary education, and I just had a previous guest on, and that's his like that's what he loves. That's what he does. That's he's a director of curriculum in a school in New York, in New Jersey, sorry, and he again approaches it that way. And we were talking, and it's just like, yeah, how do we bring what I've learned in English, how does that actually relate to what I'm covering in math, to what I've covered in science? Or how can we just find that common ground to give our students the applications that they're going to be facing? We talk about real world and finding, all this stuff, but by getting them to understand how to learn
Mm.
is I think key. It doesn't, forget content for the better part, but if we can all teach them how to learn, and then look to other points in their sphere of learning, then it's only going to be a benefit for them.
Absolutely. And I think actually that goes back to the whole AI conversation, because it's that idea of figuring out why are we actually going through the learning process, and what does it mean to learn. And learning's not about skipping to the end and getting the answer as quickly as possible. What is that process that you go through? And I remember being at uni and learning about metacognition and how important that was to teach kids about, learning how to learn. But now more than ever, if kids don't see the whole why of why we go through the learning process, then of course the temptation to skip to the end as quickly as possible is going to be there. Yeah, it's although the themes of the kind of discussions that we have throughout the years don't seem to change, that it's the what's going on in the world around us that is that catalyst for those conversations. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Definitely, it's what is happening now. What's going on with in these young people's lives? And I mean, we know that they get a lot of their information online. A lot of it is correct, but there's so much that is incorrect from people who are speaking, and for whatever reason, they are in a position of authority, or they are an assumed position of authority. So, how, as educators, or how do you, as an educator, I guess, challenge that, or push back on that, because you're in that virtual space, you're in that learning center, which we'll get to, and hopefully you'll explain it. But it was just as we are talking about social media and society, it's just, how do we teach our students to be able to critically think, design thinking, we talked about metacognition. It's like all this sort of stuff how do we actually bring that to our students so they understand it?
Yeah. Look, I think we've tried to do that along the way with things like advertising and believing what we see, and doctored images and those kinds of things. Then we talked critical literacy for a long time. And I don't think that has changed. We still need to teach kids to question things, and showing them examples of where that's gone wrong, getting them to debate about these topics, about the use of AI in different situations, and when is it ethical and when is it not ethical and why. And kids have so much understanding and passion about things that they see as important, and I think sometimes we tend to lead that discussion, and to be honest, the kids do a better job of it sometimes. So I think maybe just giving them the kind of, I don't know, the topics to discuss, and letting them come to the conclusions themselves often works. I mean, AI is new for all of us, teachers and kids alike. So I think it'll get to the point really quickly where kids won't see AI as a separate thing. It's going to be embedded in everything. And so there will be that ability for adults to be able to speak into that conversation and say, did you know this? Or what do you think about this? And give that, those suggestions for topics. But I think kids are smart, and generally they don't want to do the wrong thing, but they do want to know how to use things properly. And so we do need to explicitly unpack that for them and show them what that looks like, I think.
Yeah, they inherently want to please whoever it may be. They want, whether it's their friends, their teacher, their parents, they want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, that they're being good people, regardless of what we see in the media. Yes, there's rat bags out there, no doubt about that. Always has been, always will be. But I think for the great, I think there's far more good in the world, especially in the education world, than there is negative. And I, absolutely support all the teachers who are going through the tough times. And thank you for doing it. But yeah, it's getting them to go, well, where are you at? What do you want to actually learn? What do you want to know about? And giving them that agency, because once they have that, then all of a sudden they go, oh, hold on, I'm valuable. What people think is valuable. And then it's the next thing is having that discussion, teaching them how to have a strong discussion, a disagreement, an argument, but still come out polite, rational, civil at the end of it.
Yeah, and I think that's missing from society in general at the moment, as a vast generalization. But
Oh, yeah, I agree.
I do think that we've lost the art of debating and being able to have a discussion. And there's that whole, cancel culture, where if we don't agree with something or it doesn't fit our algorithm, then we don't see it and we don't engage with it. And I think the world is slowly starting to realize that we need to bring back that ability to discuss and debate respectfully. And yeah, it's important.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of not being in line, breaking rules, and not having a traditional things and all that sort of stuff that happens, like, I work in what would be a traditional school. We have classrooms, the students show up, and the students leave, and, we work on computers and we work in collaboratively. But you are head of a virtual school.
Yes.
How does that work? Because I'm assuming your hours are probably very similar to mainstream schools, but how? And we've done the online learning when with the COVID situation, but how does that work now on a day-to-day basis? Like, who are your students?
Yeah, so we actually have prep to year 12 at our online school, and we, in our junior and middle years, most of our classes are in the morning. The students will log on. It's a compacted day, if you like, and then they have the afternoon to go on with some independent work. We also have optional help desk sessions, which are kind of like optional tutorials where the students can touch base with their teachers every day and get a little bit of extra help if they need that one-on-one, or sometimes in small groups. And those live lessons in the morning sessions are all recorded, where students can, if they miss it because they've got an appointment or they're traveling or for a number of reasons, they can go back and watch those and catch up. Senior school is similar, except a little bit more like a senior timetable, where their lessons might be spread out throughout the week, and they're going to, a couple of doubles a week for each of their subject, but they've got specialist teachers in all of those areas. So I think in Queensland, we're very lucky in that it's a lot easier than the other states across Australia to have a distance education program. We're an independent school, and so there are a few other independent programs out there. But when we were doing the kind of research to have a look at what that looked like, some programs had kids sitting on computers from kind of 8:39 in the morning to 3 o'clock, and we didn't really like that model. That was, even as an adult, I found that really tough during COVID, and it's tiring being online all day. So we didn't want that model where we had kids online all day. We didn't think that was a healthy model for little growing bodies. And then other programs kind of just, they might have mailed out the work at the start of the term. The kids filled it out by themselves with their parents' help, and then they sent it back at the end. Some programs had a couple of check-ins a week where they could reach out to tutors or adults who would help them along with that journey. But we wanted something kind of in the middle. We wanted a program where teachers could build relationships with the kids. The kids would have that person who they knew was really invested in their learning, got to know them really well. They could talk to the other kids in their class online every day and build relationships with them as well. But, they weren't going to be sitting there all day long. So we found that the virtual learning community, or VLC as we call it, the VLC kind of catered to that sweet spot in the middle where it was very much about building a trusted relationship with a teacher who gets to know you and can help you along that journey. So mum and dad aren't sitting at home having to do all the teaching and planning and reporting themselves, but at the same time it kind of catered to kids who wanted to get their work done and pursue other passions in a lot of cases.
Okay, so I'm actually surprised that it's prepped through to 12. I can say, oh yeah, high school, I get that. That sort of makes sense, or even middle school type of setting. But having like little people, like little humans, logging on and doing those things, and because we talk about a lot about school is so important for socialization, which look, it has its merits for sure, but you are talking about building relationships with teachers, with with classmates. So how does that actually work? Like, what does it look like? Because that you do your double lesson, and then teacher gets cranky when someone interrupting because you're having a conversation. So what does that look like in practicality?
Yeah, it's very much an interactive platform. So we had a look at building our pedagogical model out and having a look at what is really important to us as an online school as opposed to a face-to-face school. And the very first thing in our pedagogical model is around positive relationships and virtual environments. So having a look at how do we take the cognitive burden away for kids who are online every day, and how do we make it a really positive experience? The kinds of techniques that we go through with our teachers is how do you build that trusted relationship in an online model? And I think when we first started, there were a few people who were kind of interested in coming across and being a teacher in the VLC, but they said, oh, but we really love, building relationships with our kids. And almost as if you couldn't possibly do that in an online environment.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the biggest eye-opener for us in those first couple of years, when we have get-togethers each term, we have social events, we have enrichment days where students can come together, and, they'd come together and it would almost be like the teachers were rock stars. Mr. Cullen, Mrs. Jorka. And it was just beautiful to see that, and also to see them engage with each other. And, we had a social event a couple of weeks ago, and you're seeing those kids who come term after term and have built those relationships over time with people. And it takes away those feelings of isolation. Most people who are learning from home already have quite well established social networks, whether it's church groups or other homeschooling and distance ed families, or heavily involved in sport. And so it's not like these children are sitting at home for, day after day after day with no other interactions. They have really strong networks, but what they want is for kids to be able to engage with each other and learn from each other. And so we absolutely do that in the virtual classroom. And so we've got positive relationships, explicit teaching, which for us is really important because we have such a small amount of time online as compared to a on-campus classroom. And then the third one is around checking for understanding, and that's just vital as part of explicit teaching as well. But to be able to make sure that we don't have the kids in front of us, we can't keep them back for 5 minutes after class if we need to go through a concept. We need to make sure that as we go along, the students are understanding. It's not just that we're teaching it, but that they're learning it. And so how do you do that? And again, it's through having thoughtful techniques around how to have lots of formative check-ins as well as kind of your big assessment pieces. So that's what it looks like for us.
Yeah, it's It's, I guess, in a way, it's hard to imagine, and I know, like, for me, like, yeah, I've built relationships all around the world through a screen, so I understand the concept as an adult of, oh, I can do it because I can have these, amazing conversations, the richness of there, even for someone who I've never met before, because we've got these similarities, or we're educators, or we're involved in technology, or we've got an interest in this, or whatever it might be. But for children to do that, it seems, I guess, they find the uniqueness of it. They see the value in it. Am I incorrect in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's certainly parents are such an incredibly important factor, especially in those younger years where often you'll have the parents sitting just off to the side or, just off screen and helping their child through, sitting and listening to the lesson and being able to then follow up with the independent work that the children have to do following the lesson. But you think of how adept kids are on gaming consoles and those kinds of things, at really young ages. So they're fine with the technology, they're fine with the video calls, and for them, it's just a different way of doing it. And for a lot of kids who come into the VLC, it's because mainstream school hasn't worked for them for whatever reason. And so I remember talking to a family, one of our long-term families, who said their child, for a certain reason, had to go to school, could only last, an hour or two, and then would have to go home mid-morning or lunchtime. So missed out on those interactions every day, whereas this platform gives them the ability to be able to, if they need a little breakaway, they're having a moment, they can just turn off the camera, go for a run around the house, reset and come back and listen. And so it's just allowed kids who, for a multitude of reasons, haven't been able to engage in a traditional education to suddenly be able to make these relationships, and the other kids in the class love them just as they would every other kid on the class, and they're a vital part of that class community, and that's really important for a kid's self-esteem and their ability to make those social connections. So those are the kinds of stories that make all of this worthwhile, because we don't think that we're the right school for every child, but no school is the right school for every child.
100% agree on that one.
And so just giving parents and students the option is what makes this journey a really incredible one.
Yeah, and I guess that's such a great advantage in our current climate, that we have all these, oh, sorry, not we, the young people, these all these little humans that we're trying to educate, that they have got all these options available to them to suit them, to suit their environment, to suit their personality. So it's, credit to Hillcrest in what they're doing in providing this opportunity for the virtual learning community. But in saying that, so you have a bricks and mortar school
Mhm.
down on the southern Gold Coast, but your student population, you talked about earlier that they come on for open days and to meet the teachers and social gatherings, and I'm assuming award evenings and things like that, and to celebrate achievements. So is your student body primarily Gold Coast based, or do you have it from the wider region, or how is that working?
Yeah, good question. So we do actually have students from all across Queensland. The vast majority of our student body is from the Gold Coast. And so that makes it a really nice kind of hybrid approach as much as we can make it. So obviously in a distance ed school in Queensland, all of the learning has to be done online, but we can allow students to come in for things like interschool sport, or be part of the drama club, or be part of the musical or chess club, or a multitude of things that come with being a big college. So, they can come on for cross country and sports days and some of the big milestone events, year 10 semi-formal and those sorts of things. And then we have events that are just to build community within our VLC, which is, like you were saying before, around the enrichment days and the social events and those sorts of things. We have actually had students fly down from Townsville and Cairns. They, sometimes come once a year or to a couple of those events a year, which is really lovely for us to think that they value that so much that they're willing to make that investment, which is really special. But we also don't want it to be a substandard experience for someone that is living in, Dalby or Townsville or Mackay or wherever, that can't get along to those things. So we've also put a lot of effort into having online events. So, we've had trivia nights and family feud nights and those types of things that are all facilitated online. The kids themselves, our student leaders, have come up with some social clubs. So sometimes they just have hangout clubs in lunch times online where they can just chat about things that are happening for them. We've got kids running film and TV clubs and book clubs and cooking clubs and art clubs and those sorts of things. So it's been this lovely kind of organic growth of these opportunities that the kids themselves have said, we'd love to do this. And so just being able to empower them to take those ideas and run with them. So yeah, we've definitely a lot of kids on the Gold Coast and Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, but we do have a lot of families that are quite regional.
Okay, yeah, and I guess their parents, obviously, those who have the means to fly down or travel down to the Gold Coast for these. Obviously, they see not only the value and the love they have for their child, but also the value that they place upon the community and getting to know them. So obviously, that's very much something that you and your team have worked hard at doing and formulating.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think any good school should take feedback from parents as part of the decision making process, and we've tried really hard to do that. And so this year we've launched some parent reps that can kind of feed into that space as well at all of our year levels and have those contacts between parents, which is something that they were really asking for, because it's not, especially in the case of rural families, it's not just the children that are feeling isolated, it's the parents too. And so to be able to give them a network has been an added benefit for us as well.
That's yeah. You make an absolute huge point of, yeah. Regional families do feel isolated. I had the opportunity when I first started teaching to work in regional Australia, and yeah, it's all their families wanted was to have a school like we were building in their town, so they didn't have to send them down to boarding school, so they didn't have to send them hours away or have them. At that time it was all the schoolwork mailed out to them and stuff like that. So yeah, so community, I guess it's in your name as well, virtual learning community. So community is a premium value.
Yeah, absolutely. At Hillcrest, we've got our junior learning community, our middle learning community, senior learning community across our 3 sub schools. And so for us, when we launched a distance ed model for Hillcrest, it was just a natural flow on for us that we wanted community to be at the heart of it. And so hence the virtual learning community. And it's more than a school. Our educational model goes kind of beyond just purely academics to look at wellbeing and spiritual aspect, being a Christian school. And so we're very much values driven. We look at emotional intelligence. And I guess, we have a lot of kids come to us that have been through the mainstream system and are a little bit broken from it because of their experience for a number of reasons. And so my deputy often talks about the VLC as being like a little greenhouse. We kind of take these kids in who are a little bit broken, need a little bit of special care, and we water them and we pour nutrients into them, and then they'll get to a point, some of them, where they can go and be planted back in the garden, and some of them do then want to go back to a mainstream school. Some of them will stay with us right through to year 12 and graduation, which is amazing. But at the end of the day, it gives people choice. And I think that's what education has been missing for a long time. And so that's why it's just so lovely to be able to say, yeah, not every school will suit everyone, but here are lots of options for you that you can choose for your child at this point in their education. So that's probably what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome. I absolutely love the concept of it. But logistically, I mean, we all have caps on our class sizes depending on the school. And you go, wow, it's a virtual school. So is there I guess in reality, if as long as you got the bandwidth, you could have the student. But for that community and for those relationship building values that you have, do you guys have, like, is there a limit on each year group? Is there a waiting list? Have you got parents going, we want to be part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've played around with a few models. We're into our fourth year now. So again, taking on feedback, having a look at what works, what doesn't work. And so we started off with composite classes, then we split into single streams. So we've now got single streams for all years apart from year 1, 2 is still a composite. And so that's been a lovely transition. We wanted to keep class sizes small. So last year we had our year 9 cohort really blow out to around high 30s, and we said no, we'd always talked about keeping class sizes small, so that teachers can build relationships with the students, and just as they would in a regular classroom. So I know some distance ed models have that kind of one teacher or one tutor to 80 students, and we went, oh, that's really tough to build relationships. So we played around with splitting those classes out. Then we kind of said, oh, the teaching component, if you can get an expert teacher who can teach however many kids, 100, 200 kids at the same time, they're getting the same message. But what we want to be able to provide is that interactivity, being able to ask questions, being known, and so forth. Again, we've played around with it again this year, and we've given teachers where they might have a few extra students in the class, we've given them additional line, or, we've worked it into their timetable so that they have additional time for making those relationships. We have got something called life groups though, and that's probably what makes us a little bit different from a lot of distance ed programs out there, in that it's a pastoral care lesson or session each day where the teacher actually has, and they are limited to around 25. A lot of them are kind of sitting high teens or 20s at the moment. But the life group teacher is their main point of contact. So if anything's going on in their lives, in their family, in their world, it's a point of contact for, yes, they can go to their subject teacher, but if things are just going badly for them, they're going away on holiday, they are going to be traveling for a while, or grandma's in hospital, or the dog's died, or any of those things which affect kids and affect the way that they're learning, that teacher knows them better than anyone else in the school and kind of invests in their family. And for our senior kids, they travel with them through, years 9, 10, 11, 12, and so get to know those students and the families really well. And that is important because being remote, you want to have that point of contact and not just feel like you're a number in the system. So yeah, we have been really purposeful with our staffing model and how we use that to support the students. We never did want that model where it was just, one teacher with a multitude of students.
Yeah. Yeah, trying to almost that almost the university model where you've got 200. Yep, just bring it in. You're just a number, off you go, and type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we've been talking a lot about community and relationships within the students and how they're interacting. But I'm assuming you have a teaching team.
Yes.
You have a management structure, and you have all those things within your community. Now, how are those teachers just VLC teachers, or do they teach in the mainstream, I guess, on campus, or is a hybrid, and how are they looked after? Because when I've taught in sort of upper, I've taught in a K-12 school, primary teachers are very separate, and the high school teachers are here, and then you've got your specialist teachers over here. How do you build that community and camaraderie within your staff?
Yeah, well, first of all, a lot of teachers think because we're a distance education school that we don't physically have teachers on campus, but that's not true. Most of our teachers do come to campus throughout the week, and that was really important to us. We had a lot of conversations when we were creating the VLC about, do we let people work remotely, and we could potentially get staff from anywhere we liked, which would be amazing. But at the end of the day, we wanted to create a really strong culture. And so for us, it was, let's start with a really tight team. And then once we kind of had that strong culture, then we could loosen the reins a little bit. And so that's what we've done. We had all of our staff on site 5 days a week at the start. And as, time has gone on, most of our full-time staff usually work, 2 or 3 days on campus and then the other 2 or 3 days at home. So we still have lots of opportunities. We have staff meetings together. We have, social events together and those sorts of things that bring that strong sense of team. But also it's been able to give a lot of people freedom to kind of manage family life and just life in general, which I think has been really appealing for the teachers as well. And we do have a couple of staff who work off-site entirely. We've got a couple of part-time French teachers who live up on the Sunshine Coast, and that has been cool to be able to get the best skill set no matter where they live. But again, it's taken real intentional meeting times and practice to include those people and make sure that, they do feel a part of community and don't feel hung out to dry or, just out there on the edges somewhere. So it's intentional.
Yeah, and I think it's so important now more than ever, because we've discussed a whole range of tech and how it's impacting society in general. But behind the tech, there's always a person, or behind and the humanists, and we talked about it, right at the beginning, that AI has this, or the current stand has the ability to give us back time to invest, to build relationships. So, and I guess that's what you're doing, and I think it's a marvel to see.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm so proud of our teachers. I'm like a mother hen. Honestly, it's hard. It's hard starting something from scratch, which is what we did. It's hard building something. We talk a lot about building the plane in the sky. You always want to get that balance where you're supporting staff, but at the same time, it's hard doing something that's different from what everyone else is doing. It takes more effort. It takes a bigger time investment. You're never quite sure if the way that you're doing it is the right way. And so we talk a lot about learning, learning through failure, and about getting feedback and refining our practice and those sorts of things. But the team that we've got in the VLC is just really incredible, and go the extra mile to make sure that those kids who are in the VLC for whatever reason have a really close community experience and are able to hopefully feel that love and care that they're trying to portray.
Well, from everything you've said so far, it sounds like you are definitely fostering that community that you are building. And like you said, it is hard work to build something new. And I guess it's probably even harder to build something where you're not physically close. But it sounds like you are absolutely doing it, and doing it very, very successfully. So I tip my hat to you and your team, Danni, because I know you couldn't do what you're doing without a strong team to help you do what to help you lead them, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. The team is everything. No one person or a couple of people could do this by themselves. It takes everyone to have the same vision and, walking in the same direction. So I'm very lucky.
Yes, absolutely. Lucky and blessed.
Yes.
Now, speaking of challenges, our conversation has flown by. And I want to value, and I do value and respect your time, especially being on holidays as well.
Yeah.
But I just want to finish off with just a couple of questions, and the first one being challenge. We've just finished talking about challenges. What is a challenge that you would put out there to people who are listening to this conversation now?
I think, not every school needs to go out and build a virtual school, but I do think schools need to look at how to do things differently. And, I think we can rest on our laurels a little bit and say, oh, we're a very successful school. This is the way we've always done things. Why would we want to change anything now? But as we started talking about right at the start, the world is moving so quickly. And I think that if we just keep doing things the way that we've always done them, schools are going to find themselves a little bit out of the loop and not really catering to the people that they're meant to be supporting. Yeah, I would challenge schools to take a long, hard look at how we can do things a little bit differently, because although it's frightening and scary and takes a lot of time and effort, it is also exciting when you come across something that you go, this is amazing, and not a lot of people are doing it.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and that's, I think I said it earlier, that the young people today have so many opportunities, but in saying that, you've got to have the people there who want to promote those opportunities. Like you said, if schools don't keep up, then they're going to find themselves irrelevant. And it sounds like what you're doing is far from that. You're finding the relevance with these students. Now, we worked together a number of years ago, and we reconnected through LinkedIn. But if people wanted to find out more about you, talk to you, find out more about the virtual learning community, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so you can search me on LinkedIn at Danni Foster Brown. Otherwise, you can have a look at our virtual learning community website. So virtual.hillcrest.qld.edu.au is our website, and certainly just contact me through there. All the socials, all the normal ones.
I'll definitely put links to your LinkedIn and to the virtual learning school website for sure.
Awesome.
I'll put those in the show notes. Now, Danni, it wouldn't be the Tattoo Teacher podcast if I didn't ask you, do you, Danni Foster Brown, have any tattoos?
I do not. No, I don't. I often think about what would I get if I ever got one, but I don't know.
Living on the Gold Coast and no tattoos, you are certainly breaking the norms. Virtual schools and no tattoos, that's amazing.
Never say never.
Well, exactly. But be careful when you say yes, because you just never know. But Danni, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate everything that you've shared today, for your time, for your wisdom, for your passion behind education and your willingness to push the boundaries for the sake of our young people.
Thank you. That's lovely.
So enjoy the rest of your break, which will age when this podcast is released, but enjoy the rest of your break. And it was so good speaking to you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.